What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki. Hope you're ready to go for the MHA 333 with me. Sorry for the delay, but they were working on the windows and that led to a lot of hammering. Now that the windows are taken care of, get to recording in optimal conditions. Now, first off, we're going with 333, beginning of the chapter. You already know we go page by page with the breakdowns. Shigaraki. And in this case, we can tell that it was moreover all for one talking in this scenario. He's talking about being placed on edge by the idea of more or less Star and Stripe and Deku working together. Specifically on this page, he says One for All and New Order colluding together. The thing that I find fascinating about this is that it is completely possible or arguable that one of the things I suggested is with the number one hero being as powerful as she is, she might be willing to sacrifice herself to burn out and try to force Deku to give her the One for All, even if it would have put an immense burden on her life. This chapter kind of proves that could have been a topic on hand, and the idea of New Order being boosted by One for All likely would have meant more rules being allowed, or at the very least she could have used a rule on One for All itself to make it more manageable for her body, which using even access to 100% of what Deku has access to, plus her New Order abilities, would have been kind of ridiculous. So even ignoring that, Deku realistically wouldn't have wanted to do that. That is something that if those powers had truly come together in such a fashion, it would be kind of insane. And with All for One being the primary, or Vestige for One being the primary speaker here, focusing on all the harm he's caused to the Safety Commission, all these different things to delay the potential pairing of these two. So while simultaneously acknowledging that her coming here before he had Shigaraki's body or the Melvin form prepared was an extremely disadvantageous situation, but also acknowledging that with the power of One for All and his ability to steal quirks already, I kind of wonder if One for All and All for One as two quirks combined would lead to All for One being so amped of a power that he'd be able to just simply take from anywhere in the world at any time. I think that there is some genuine danger to that, though whether or not his body could actually support that much energy and power is a whole other discussion. And we see a little bit of early celebrating here, but Star and Stripe goes ahead and uses a rule to say that Kathleen Bate won't decay, trying to exempt herself from the rules of decay, only for it to be confirmed that it did exceed her endurance cap. The ability was not strong enough. We got that explanation in the previous chapter about how she couldn't be amped up too far, and clearly this goes beyond, decay is beyond what her powers tap into, which, if you remember, I've pointed out that Aries' power seems to reflect the progression and rewinding of time, whereas, or restoration to a certain degree, whereas Shigaraki's decay points towards entropic forces, the inevitable heat death, destruction, etc. Now, that said, in the middle of celebrating and talking all that mess and how New Order requires verbal commands and how he thought he figured it out and how, you can tell he was really thinking ahead here, like, yeah, I'm going to be able to win and take control of the situation. I'm going to be number one now. He's talking about how he purposely didn't read beyond the first 3 volumes because he already knew that the villain would lose in the end, but he wanted to see what the villain had gotten to achieve. And we finally get to see what the comics from back then were. It's Captain Hero. His design is similar to Alan Scott's. I don't know if that's going to be important or not, but it's just something we should keep in the back of our minds going forward. And then once he goes to actually use New Order, he was going to apply some kind of principle to, the air, whether it was going to be solid, and then he was just going to touch it and then decay everything around them, so that all the planes and all that other stuff ended up, it doesn't matter, because we immediately cut to the Vestige world of All for One, like happily trying to meld and cling on to Shigaraki. Well, he seems kind of surprised. And then we get the worst case of allergies any character has been seen. Shigaraki is really the victim and the beneficiary of Horikoshi's passions, because the body horror, the destruction, the damage that he purposely puts his body through just so he can express himself with his pen, while simultaneously giving him such an important role within the narrative, and being based on that first character that he ever designed, that little one-shot to with Tenko. It just kind of all seems to be, as whenever Shigaraki's on the page at this point in the story, Horikoshi is really giving it his all. And Shigaraki was literally exploding everywhere. The pilots straight up say, she's exploding, do you think Star? And then we get the reveal that New Order revolts against other quirks. And as they're in the air and the team is trying to decide what they want to make their next move be, we get that cutaway to Kathleen Bate, to the vestige of New Order just rampaging through the All for One quirk singularity space, just smashing through and punching and stomping on all these different quirks. And we get an insight of what Star and Stripe's strategy here was. She was like, the worst case scenario is I die, he gets New Order, and there's just nothing to it. But in exchange, instead, the idea of getting saved more than almost seems like it was a bait. After the punch, she might have set the New Order rule in, and it was more or less expecting him to get there, and she would have been willing to try it with the fist bump to the earth. But at the end of the day, he got too close too fast, so she just accepted that her quirk was likely going to be stolen, and instead opted for trying to not be decayed as a bluff to Shigaraki, so that his guard would drop and he'd be complacent, leading into this internal attack. So, because that in exchange for just my life is a small price to pay, means that around that time when she realized she couldn't stop him, she was already planning on how she would take him out even if she died, with seeing this likely as the optimal way. Now, the bros are like, thanks for everything. All for One is describing it as like a cannibalistic invader, just eating. We finally get confirmation that while Shigaraki can, or All for One can give out quirks and he can steal quirks, they cannot just decide to delete a quirk out of their system. This means that as long as he is carrying New Order, she will still rampage through his body, which means that even if every other quirk is eliminated, until it is just New Order left within him, I don't think that he can do anything or fight back. So we get the clarification when the laser beams are being fired into Melvin, that the reflect quirk is gone. Some people are like, oh, well, maybe that's just the only quirk. More than likely, I think that he's managed to destroy a couple of quirks in the process, but that was the first one that he actively tried to use and found out and got confirmation that this quirk was not going to work. But he had also already mentioned that his quirks were directly exploding, so if his quirks are exploding out of his body, then there's a chance that throughout the entire process he's like, oh shit, I just lost this innocuous quirk that never mattered on screen. I lost this other quirk that was never going to matter on screen. Oh, I lost this. I lost this X, Y, and Z. But when he was trying to tap into it, and we kind of even see that Shigaraki and All for One are being torn apart from each other, where depending on which quirk gets destroyed first could end up being a major deciding factor in whether or not Decay or All for One is the guiding quirk force within Shigaraki's body. It could even be that in the process of New Order revolting against these quirks, New Order helps destroy the vestige within Shigaraki, and maybe he no longer has access to just being able to steal quirks left and right anymore. But in exchange for that, he'll still have a couple of quirks left, and maybe then his hatred will allow him to decay away the Kathleen Bate vestige, which will then allow him to have, maybe 7, 8, 9 quirks, just like Deku's gonna have, that's those 7 quirks, and then they'll both be forced to make it work from there with their physical modifications, and with, Shigaraki being physically enhanced to have near All Might level strength. It could kind of balance out that way. We get that cut back to the movie, once again looping in the first movie to the manga, establishing like Kathy, dedicated her life to repaying All Might for sacrificing and being willing to fight on the front line for hers and her family. We don't know for sure if All for One gets away or not, because it could be that as the Nomu was moving in, he's screaming curses. It looks like the Nomu's moving. He's like, quickly, damn it. There's a chance that the Nomu gets a hold of him, but the Nomu seems to fly away when all those lasers are coming in, so it's hard to believe that if he grabbed Shigaraki's body, that the Nomu is going to be filled with the quirk yet. So New Order is likely going, if the Nomu is running away with a small piece of Shigaraki that's exploding and bursting and all this other stuff, then it might be that not until we get down to almost the last 2-3 quirks, until it's just All for One, Shigaraki, and basically hyper regeneration constantly surviving the onslaught from the New Order vestige that Shigaraki's in perpetual damage until we get to that point, recovers, and then maybe Shigaraki establishes dominance through the decay or whatever, and the vestige for one doesn't have enough power to really hold off Shigaraki, and he becomes the truly dominant personality, allowing him to go back, take out All For One for even trying this with him, and move forward to the story as the villain he's trying to be. With him effectively, while Shigaraki has always had his predecessor's acceptance, Deku has kind of had to earn his, and I think it will be poetic for Shigaraki to directly make the conscious decision to say, I do not need your approval anymore or your support. I can do this now on my own, and thanks to some of the connections you've made, people already assume that I am you. I will now take your influence and swallow that too, just like he's done with Stain, just like he's done with the Metal Liberation Army, just like he's done with Overhaul, taking Overhaul Science. So at that point, you have him taking everything that embodies All For One's legacy, decaying All For One, and taking that for himself, creating that image just like he's done with so many other villains throughout the story. Shigaraki's ascension could very well be at hand. The end of the era of Melvin may be upon us. And in exchange, we may be finally getting that dark horizon from Tomura Shigaraki, the return of Tenko, whatever the case may be. I know like some people were like, oh, I'm not gonna say that Star and Stripe was wasted. Even reducing her to a simple plot device seems a little dishonest due to the fact that people were insistent that some heroes from overseas needed to come, and people were rampant about this. And I was like, man, I don't know, like a lot of them realistically have their own troubles to deal with, and sure enough, they had their own troubles to deal with, which led to a bunch of red tape on a lot of these other heroes being deployed. So only one or two heroes were likely to make that risk in it. And even Admiral Akbar said, like, this rate would cost more than your career. So from that perspective, a lot of them couldn't afford to not be able to be a hero anymore in their own town. So whoever few heroes, whichever ones would come to Japan, were likely going to be putting their lives and careers on the line anyway. So this allows for us to have Star. We know that she would have lost her career as a hero. We know that she would have been, unfortunately, or depending on how you want to look at it, because since she did manage to almost completely resolve the issue with this, some people will say it's unfortunate that she's likely gonna die or is dead here and will likely stay dead or would have been executed if she went back home anyway. So all around, I enjoyed this chapter. I know some people really wanted her to stick around just because they were already in love, and that happens a lot with the women in MHA. Y'all just really get attached to them real quick. But sorry that you, never mind, I'm not even gonna say what you need in real life, but support you guys. Thank you for watching the video. This one ended up not being as long since it's more of an action-oriented chapter, which that's okay. Sorry for the delay again. Just didn't have good recording conditions due to construction being done on the house. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you Sunday.